Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Adventure Mystery Book Club. I'm Bill Mallory, branch manager of the La Jolla Library, and we are reading Whose Body by Dorothy L. Sayers, almost to the end of it. But before we do our little recap of previous chapter, I would like to point out that your homework, and you have homework this week. Your homework is to look at the Facebook page and find the posting that I did on Monday for all of the suggestions for what we would like our next book to be. So the next title we will start reading on Monday at 4 p.m. And so, if you have not already done so, um, your homework is to go to that Facebook post. There are some suggested titles on there. Obviously, there's a lot more titles that are currently available that are available, public domain and available on Project Gutenberg, so everyone can look at it for free. And I changed. I'm going to warn you right now. I changed the post. I actually edited it after I posted it because um, we were getting down to 9 titles, and I kind of wanted to freshen up the list a little bit, just give people some further suggestions. And so I've added some titles on there that were not on there originally for the first post, and it's things like A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain, A Turn of the Screw by Henry James, Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. What else? The Man Who Would Be King by Rudyard Kipling. Um, some really great stuff. I mean, some really good stories are in public domain. Um, so I've added all those along with I've thrown in a couple of other returning authors that we've already read, but there's other really great titles like The Time Machine by H.G. Wells or The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And those are all really good stories as well, in addition to the other ones, of course, that we've already been going over. So take a look at that. Just wanted to kind of freshen things up a little bit, add some new additions, some new possibilities to think of, and of course, if you would like to suggest something completely different from that, then certainly welcome to see what your suggestions are. We only ask that they be in public domain because it makes it easier for copyright purposes, and if it's in public domain, then it should also be available on Project Gutenberg so that people can download it and read it for free and have it available to them, like all of our titles, including Whose Body by Dorothy L. Sayers, the first of the Lord Peter Wimsey books. And as we go speeding downhill towards our inevitable end, we are realizing, as all of this is sort of coming together, in our last chapter, Lord Peter is kind of talking about how he believes that it is this physician, this Sir Julian Freak, who has, of course, a person of good standing within the community. He's a doctor. He works at a hospital. He trains doctoral students in anatomy. He takes apart a lot of cadavers in the name of research. He has written several well-respected books on the subject. And also, a lot of the focus tends to come from his belief that good and evil and other things are not just whims of the mind or decisions to be made. They are actual um, physical parts of the brain, and that if you alter the physicality of the brain itself, then you would be altering someone's capacity for good or for evil or for a great number of other emotions. So that's sort of his premise on this whole thing, and it looks like the person who has um, stashed the body away in the bathtub, in Mr. Thip's bathtub, looks to be, although it has not been confirmed yet, it looks to be Sir Julian Freak. And of course, he's working with Mr. Parker of Scotland Yard, who is helping him with some of the legwork involved with this. And in our last chapter, we come across, it's really kind of interesting because it's almost like a little aside from the regular story, because Lord Peter Wimsey says, I have not really spoken to this person face to face. I have not really seen him myself to sort of judge the nature of his character myself. I've only gotten information from outside sources. So he goes to basically visiting hours. He has these sort of open hours where he sees the public, and goes into the waiting room, and there's all these sort of nervous people, and so he hands one of the people staffed there his business card, and he says, I think if once he sees who I am, he'll want to talk to me. And that turns out to be the case. He comes in and he relates the story that we had read several chapters before of his basically a kind of nervous breakdown, or his PTSD from World War I. And he had this sort of attack of this, where he's reliving suddenly that he is on the battlefield, and that he has to protect his men, and he has to, there's gunfire everywhere, and his valet, of course, Bunter, is able to calm him down and return him to his bed, and he later goes on to seek rest in one of the country estates that the family has. And so he relates this story as the excuse to talk to Sir Julian Freak, face to face, in person, in his office. And it's a lot of the whole chapter. It's a very short chapter, but it goes back and forth a lot, and they sort of discuss, how you felt, and there's this new decision in right now that's happening that is very important, and so he will, and they don't really talk about the nature of this decision that Lord Peter has to make, but they talk about that it exists, and that it has to come up, and will it affect many people? Yes, it will affect a great many people, and of course, we as the readers know that he's talking about accusing Sir Julian Freak of murder. But of course it is unspoken, and maybe even Sir Julian Freak knows this. I mean, we've seen him on the periphery of the story, so it would not be unusual to find out that he is actually part of, he has been observing this, and he has been maybe looking into this himself a little bit, and I think it's fairly well known that both Mr. Parker and Lord Peter are actually investigating the case that he might be involved in. So he tells him, okay, you need to calm down. The stress and the anxiety created from this current situation is making you harken back to the previous stress and anxiety from World War I, and that's what the connection is. You need to find something that, sort of calm yourself. You need to, I'm going to give you a prescription. He writes out a prescription on a pad and hands it to him, and he says, I'm going to give you a shot of something that will help you. And he goes into the other room. He gets a hypodermic needle. He is, he's pinching the skin on his arm where he's about to inject this into Lord Peter's arm, and at the very instant that the needle goes down to his skin, Lord Peter grabs his wrist and stops him. And as I'm reading this, I was thinking to myself, oh, he's not going to let this guy actually stick him with something, is he? But of course they wait to the very last minute, and then he grabs hold of him, and Sir Julian Freak kind of plays it off. It's like, well, if you don't want to, you don't have to. And And Lord Peter says, "Oh, I'm such a baby about these things, and I'd rather not." And it just, again, sort of plays it off as nothing, no big deal. And that's how the chapter ends, with Lord Peter leaving the office and going on. So I'll tell you what's going to happen. We're going to read chapter 12. Chapter 12 is extremely short. And then chapter 13, our final chapter, is actually very long. So I'm going to read chapter 12, and I'm going to read part of chapter 13, and then in 2 days, on Friday, we will read the rest of chapter 13, conclude the story, and then hopefully by then we will have a new book to read on Monday. We will decide on Friday, and hopefully people will have voted by then. There are no votes as of right now. Excuse me. So, I'm hoping that folks will jump in and find a title that they want to hear and they want to read, and we can read it along together, and we can continue with our next title. So don't forget, that's your homework. Go vote on which title you would like to have be our next book, because we'll be reading it on Monday, so we'll figure something out. So if you're ready, let's read chapter 12. The vile, raw fog tore your throat and ravaged your eyes. You could not see your feet. You stumbled in your walk over poor men's graves. The feel of Parker's old trench coat beneath your fingers was comforting. You had felt it in worse places. You clung on now for fear you should get separated. The dim people moving in front of you were like Brocken specters. "Take care, gentlemen," said a toneless voice out of the yellow darkness. "There's an open grave just hereabouts." You bore away to the right and floundered in a mass of freshly turned clay. "Hold up, old man," said Parker. "Where is Lady Levy?" "In the mortuary. The Duchess of Denver is with her. Your mother's wonderful, Peter." "Isn't she?" said Lord Peter. A dim blue light carried by somebody ahead wavered and stood still. "Here you are," said a voice. Two Dante-esque shapes with pitchforks loomed up. "Have you finished?" asked somebody. "Nearly done, sir." The demons fell to work again with pitchforks. No, spades. Somebody sneezed. Parker located the sneezer and introduced him. "Mr. Levitt represents the Home Secretary, Lord Peter Wimsey. We are sorry to drag you out on such a day, Mr. Levitt." "It's all in a day's work," said Mr. Levitt hoarsely. He was muffled to the eyes. The sound of the spades for many minutes. An iron noise of tools thrown down, demons stooping and straining. A black-bearded spectre to your elbow introduced the master of the workhouse. "A very painful matter, Lord Peter. You will forgive me for hoping that you and Mr. Parker may be mistaken." "I should like to be able to hope so, too." Something heaving, straining, coming up out of the ground. "Steady, men, this way. Can you see? Be careful of the graves. They lie pretty thick hereabouts. Are you ready?" "Right you are, sir. You go on with the lantern. We can follow you." Lumbering footsteps. Catch hold of Pete Parker's trench coat again. "Is that you, old man? Oh, I beg your pardon. Mr. Levitt, I thought you were Parker." "Hello, Wimsey. Here you are." More graves. A headstone shouldered crookedly aslant. A trip and jerk over the edge of the rough grass. The squeal of gravel under your feet. This way, gentlemen, mind the step. The mortuary. Raw red brick and sizzling gas jets. 2 women in black, and Dr. Grimbold. The coffin laid on the table with a heavy thump. Have you got that there screwdriver, Bill? Thank ye. Be careful with a chisel now. Not much substance to these old ear boards, sir. Several long creaks. A sob. The Duchess's voice, kind but peremptory. Hush, Christine, you mustn't cry. A mutter of voices. The lurching departure of the Dante demons. Good, decent demons in corduroy. Dr. Grimbold's voice, cool and detached, as if in the consulting room. Now, have you got that lamp, Mr. Wingate? Thank you. Yes. Here on the table, please. Be careful not to catch your elbow in the flex, Mr. Levitt. It would be better, I think, if you came on this side. Yes, thank you. That's excellent. The sudden brilliant circle of an electric lamp over the table, Dr. Grimbold's beard and spectacles, Mr. Levitt blowing his nose, Parker bending close, the master of the workhouse peering over him. The rest of the room was in the enhanced dimness of the gas jets and the fog. A low murmur of voices, all heads bent over the work. Dr. Grimbold again, beyond the circle of the lamplight. We don't want to distress you unnecessarily, Lady Levy. If you will just tell us what to look for, Yes, certainly, and yes, stopped with gold. Yes, the lower jaw, the last one, one on the right. Yes. No teeth missing? No? Yes? What kind of a mole? Yes, just over the left breast. Oh, I beg your pardon, just under. Yes. Appendicitis? Yes. A long one? Yes. In the middle? Yes, I quite understand. A scar on the arm? Yes, I don't know if we shall be able to find that. Yes. Any little constitutional weakness that might... Oh, yes, arthritis. Yes, thank you, Lady Levy. That's very clear. Don't come unless I ask you. Now, Wingate. A pause. A murmur. Pulled out? After death, you think? Well, so do I. Where is Dr. Colgrove? You attended this man in the workhouse? Yes. Do you recollect? No. You're quite certain about that? Yes, we mustn't make a mistake, you know, but there are reasons why Sir Julian can't be present. I'm asking you, Dr. Colgrove. Well, you're certain. That's all I want to know. Just bring the light closer, Mr. Wingate, if you please. These miserable shells in the damp and it let the damp in so quickly. Ah, what do you make of this? Yes, well, that's rather unmistakable, isn't it? Who did the head? Ah, Freak, of course. I was going to say they did good work at St. Luke's. Beautiful, isn't it, Dr. Colgrove? A wonderful surgeon. I saw him when he was at Guy's. Oh, no, gave it up years ago. Nothing like keeping your hand in. Ah, yes, undoubtedly, that's it. Have you a towel handy, sir? Thank you. Over the head, if you please. I think we might have another here. Now, Lady Levy, I'm going to ask you to look at the scar and see if you recognize it. I'm sure you are going to help us by being very firm. Take your time. You won't see anything more than you absolutely must. Lucy, don't leave me. No, dear. A space cleared at the table, the lamplight on the Duchess's white hair. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. No, I couldn't be mistaken. There's that funny little kink in it. I've seen it 100 times. Oh, Lucy, Reuben. Only a moment more, Lady Levy. The mole. I think so. Oh, yes, that is the very place. Yes, and the scar. Was it three-cornered, just above the elbow? Yes. Oh, yes. Is this it? Yes, yes. I must ask you definitely, Lady Levy, do you, from these marks, identify the body as that of your husband? Oh, I mustn't I? Nobody else could have them just the same in just those places. It is my husband. It is Reuben. Oh, thank you, Lady Levy. You have been very brave and very helpful. But I don't understand yet. How did he come here? Who did this dreadful thing? Hush, dear, said the Duchess. The man is going to be punished. Oh, but how cruel! Poor Reuben, who could have wanted to hurt him? Can I see his face? No, dear, said the Duchess. That isn't possible. Come away. You mustn't distress the doctors and people. No, no, they've all been so kind. Oh, Lucy. We'll go home, dear. You don't want us any more, Dr. Grimbold? No, Duchess, thank you. We are very grateful to you and to Lady Levy for coming. There was a pause while the two women went out. Parker, collected and helpful, escorting them to their waiting car. Then Dr. Grimbold again. I think Lord Peter Wimsey ought to see the correctness of his deductions. Lord Peter? Very painful. You may wish to see. Yes, I was uneasy at the inquest. Yes, Lady Levy. Remarkably clear evidence. Yes, most shocking case. Ah, here's Mr. Parker. You and Lord Peter Wimsey entirely justified. Do I really understand? Really? I can hardly believe it. So distinguished a man, as you say, when a great brain turns to crime. Yes, look here. The marvelous work. Marvelous. Somewhat obscured by this time, of course, but the most beautiful sections. Here you see the left hemisphere, and here, through the corpus striatum, here again, the very track of the damage done by the blow. Wonderful, guessed it. Saw the effect of the blow as he struck it, you know. Ah, I should like to see his brain, Mr. Parker. And to think that, heavens, Lord Peter, you don't know what a blow you have struck at the whole profession, the whole civilized world. Oh, my dear sir, can you ask me? My lips are sealed, of course. All our lips are sealed. The way back through the burial ground. Fog again, and the squeal of wet gravel. Are your men ready, Charles? They have gone. I sent them off when I saw Lady Levy to the car. Who was with them? Sugg. Sugg? Yes, poor devil. They've had him up on the mat at headquarters for bungling the case. All that evidence of Phipps about the nightclub was corroborated, you know. That girl he gave the gin and bitters to was caught and came and identified him, and they decided their case wasn't good enough and let Phipps and the Horrocks girl go. Then they told Sugg he had overstepped his duty and ought to have been more careful. So he ought, but he can't help being a fool. I was sorry for him. It may do him some good to be in at the death. After all, Peter, you and I had special advantages. Yes, well, it doesn't matter. Whoever goes won't get there in time. Sugg's as good as another. But Sugg, in experience rare in his career, was in time. Parker and Lord Peter were at 110 Piccadilly. Lord Peter was playing Bach, and Parker was reading Oregon when Sugg was announced. "We've got our man, sir," said he. "Good God," said Peter. "Alive?" "We were just in time, my lord. We rang the bell and marched straight up past his men to the library. He was sitting there doing some writing. When we came in, he made a grab for his hypodermic, but we were too quick for him, my lord. We didn't mean to let him slip through our hands, having got so far. We searched him thoroughly and marched him off." "He is actually in jail, then?" "Oh, yes, safe enough, with 2 wardens to see he doesn't make away with himself." "You surprise me, Inspector. Have a drink." "Thank you, my lord. I may say that I'm very grateful to you. This case was turning out to be a pretty bad egg for me. If I was rude to your lordship—" "Oh, it's all right, Inspector," said Lord Peter hastily. "I don't see how you could have possibly worked it out. I had the good luck to know something about it from other sources." "That's what Freak says." Already the great surgeon was a common criminal in the inspector's eyes, a mere surname. "He was writing a full confession when we got hold of him, addressed to your lordship. The police will have to have it, of course, but seeing it's written for you, I brought it along for you to see first. Here it is." He handed Lord Peter a bulky document. "Thanks," said Peter. "I'd like to hear it, Charles." "Rather." Accordingly, Lord Peter read it aloud. And that, very briefly anyway, is the end of chapter 12. We're going to end chapter 12 on a little bit of a cliffhanger, but we are going to continue because we want to sort of even up this very large last chapter, and we'll read a little bit more. Chapter 13. "Dear Lord Peter, when I was a young man, I used to play chess with an old friend of my father's. He was a very bad and a very slow player, and he could never see when a checkmate was inevitable, but insisted on playing every move out. I never had any patience with that kind of attitude, and I will freely admit now that the game is yours. I must either stay at home and be hanged or escape abroad and live in an idle and insecure obscurity. I prefer to acknowledge defeat. If you have read my book on criminal lunacy, you will remember that I wrote, in the majority of cases, the criminal betrays himself by some abnormality attendant upon this pathological condition of the nervous tissues. His mental instability shows itself in various forms, an overweening vanity leading him to brag of his achievement, a disproportionate sense of the importance of the offense, resulting from the hallucination of religion and driving him to confession, egomania, producing the sense of horror or conviction of sin, and driving him to headlong flight without covering his tracks, a reckless confidence resulting in the neglect of the most ordinary precautions, as in the case of Henry Wainwright, who left a boy in charge of the murdered woman's remains while he went to call a cab, or, on the other hand, a nervous distrust of apperceptions in the past, causing him to revisit the scene of the crime to assure himself that all traces have been as safely removed as his own judgment knows them to be. I will not hesitate to assert that a perfectly sane man, not intimidated by religious or other delusions, could always render himself perfectly secure from detection, provided, that is, that the crime were sufficiently premeditated and that he were not pressed for time or thrown out in his calculations by purely fortuitous coincidence. You know, as well as I do, how far I have made this assertion good in practice. The 2 accidents which betrayed me I could not by any possibility have foreseen. The first was the chance recognition of Levy by the girl in the Battersea Park Road, which suggested a connection between the two problems. The second was that Phipps should have arranged to go down to Denver on the Tuesday morning, thus enabling your mother to get word of the matter through to you before the body was removed by the police, and to suggest a motive for the murder out of what she knew of my previous personal history. If I had been able to destroy these two accidentally forged links of circumstance, I will venture to say that you will never have so much as suspected me, still less obtained sufficient evidence to convict. Of all human emotions, except perhaps those of hunger and fear, the sexual appetite produces the most violent and, under some circumstances, the most persistent reactions. I think, however, I am right in saying that at the time when I wrote my book, my original sensual impulse to kill Sir Reuben Levy had already become profoundly modified by my habits of thought. To the animal lust to slay and the primitive human desire for revenge, there was added the rational intention of substantiating my own theories for the satisfaction of myself and the world. If all had turned out as I had planned, I should have deposited a sealed account of my experiment with the Bank of England, instructing my executors to publish it after my death. Now that accident has spoiled the completeness of my demonstration, I entrust the account to you, whom it cannot fail to interest, with the request that you will make it known among scientific men in justice to my professional reputation. The really essential factors of success in any undertaking are money and opportunity, and as a rule, the man who can make the first can make the second. During my early career, though I was fairly well off, I had not absolute command of circumstance. Accordingly, I devoted myself to my profession and contented myself with keeping up a friendly connection with Reuben Levy and his family. This enabled me to remain in touch with his fortunes and interests, so that when the moment for action should arrive, I might know what weapons to use. Meanwhile, I carefully studied criminology in fiction and fact. My work on criminal lunacy was a side product of this activity, and saw how in every murder the real crux of the problem was the disposal of the body. As a doctor, the means of death were always ready to my hand, and I was not likely to make any error in that connection. Nor was I likely to betray myself on account of any illusory sense of wrongdoing. The sole difficulty would be that of destroying all connection between my personality and that of the corpse. You will remember that Michael Finsbury, in Stevenson's entertaining romance, observes, "What hangs people in the unfortunate circumstance of guilt." It became clear to me that the mere leaving of a superfluous corpse could convict nobody, provided that nobody was guilty in connection with that particular corpse. Thus, the idea of substituting the one body for the other was early arrived at, though it was not till I obtained the practical direction of St. Luke's Hospital that I found myself perfectly unfettered in the choice of handling of dead bodies. From this period on, I kept a careful watch on all the material brought in for dissection. My opportunity did not present itself until the week before Sir Reuben's disappearance, when the medical officer at the Chelsea workhouse sent word to me that an unknown vagrant had been injured that morning by a fall of a piece of scaffolding, and was exhibiting some very interesting nervous and cerebral reactions. I went round and saw the case, and was immediately struck by the man's strong superficial resemblance to Sir Reuben. He had been heavily struck on the back of the neck, dislocating the fourth and fifth cervical vertebrae, and heavily bruising the spinal cord. It seemed highly unlikely that he would ever recover, either mentally or physically, and in any case there appeared to me to be no object in indefinitely prolonging so unprofitable an existence. He had obviously been able to support life until recently, as he was fairly well nourished, but the state of his feet and clothing showed that he was unemployed, and under present conditions he was likely to remain so. I decided that he would suit my purpose very well, and immediately put in train certain transactions in the city which I had already sketched out in my own mind. In the meantime, the reactions mentioned by the workhouse doctor were interesting, and I made careful studies of them, and arranged for the delivery of the body to the hospital when I should have completed my preparations. On Thursday and Friday of that week I made private arrangements with various brokers to buy the stock of certain Peruvian oil fields, which had gone down almost to waste paper. This part of my experiment did not cost me very much, but I contrived to arouse considerable curiosity, and even a mild excitement. At this point I was, of course, careful not to let my name appear. The incident of Saturday and Sunday gave me some anxiety lest my man should, after all, die before I was ready for him, but by the use of saline injections I contrived to keep him alive, and late on Sunday night he even manifested disquieting symptoms of, at any rate, a partial recovery. On Monday morning the market in Peruvians opened briskly. Rumors had evidently got about that somebody knew something, and this day I was not the only buyer in the market. I bought a couple of hundred more shares in my own name and left the matter to take care of itself. At lunchtime I made my arrangements to run into Levy accidentally at the corner of the mansion house. He expressed, as I expected, his surprise at seeing me in that part of London. I simulated some embarrassment and suggested that we should lunch later. I dragged him to a place a bit off the usual beat, and there ordered a good wine, and drank of it as much as he might suppose sufficient to induce a confidential mood. I asked him how things were going on 'Change. He said, "Oh, all right," but appeared a little doubtful, and asked me whether I did anything in that way. I said I had a little flutter occasionally, and that, as a matter of fact, I'd been put on to rather a good thing. I glanced round apprehensively at this point and shifted my chair nearer to his. "I suppose you don't know anything about Peruvian oil, do you?" he said. I started and looked around again, and leaning across to him, I said, dropping my voice, "Well, I do, as a matter of fact, but I don't want it to get about. I stand to make a good bit on it." "But I thought the thing was hollow," he said. "It hasn't paid a dividend for umpteen years." "No," I said, "it hasn't, but it's going to. I've got inside information." He looked a bit unconvinced, and I emptied off my glass and edged right up to his ear. "Look here," I said. "I'm not giving this away to everyone, but I don't mind doing you and Christine a good turn. You know, I've always kept a soft place in my heart for her ever since the old days. You got in ahead of me that time, and now it's up to me to heap coals of fire on you both." I was a little excited by this time, and he thought I was drunk. "Well, it's very kind of you, old man," he said, "but I'm a cautious bird, you know, always was. I'd like a bit of proof." And he shrugged up his shoulders and looked like a pawnbroker. "I'll give it to you," I said, "but it isn't safe here. Come round to my place tonight after dinner, and I'll show you the report." "How did you get a hold of it?" said he. "I'll tell you tonight," said I. "Come round after dinner, any time after 9, say." To Harley Street? He asked, and I saw that he meant coming. No, I said, to Battersea, Prince of Wales Road. I've got some work to do at the hospital. And look here, I said. Don't you let on to a soul that you're coming. I bought a couple of hundred shares today in my own name, and people are sure to get wind of it. If we're known to be about together, someone will twig something. In fact, if anything but safe, it's anything but safe talking about it in this place. All right, he said. I won't say a word to anybody. I'll turn up around 9 o'clock. You're sure it's a sound thing? It can't go wrong, I assured him, and I meant it. And so we'll end it there, about a third of the way through chapter 13. We'll make that our stopping point, and we will continue with Sir Julian Freke's confession in 2 days on Friday at 4 p.m. I hope you can join me for that. We'll wrap up Whose Body by Dorothy L. Sayers, and we will see. We will see what our next book will be after that, and we will make the decision. Like I said, your homework: go to the Facebook page for the Adventure Mystery Book Club. You can take a look at the list that I've provided now with 6 new titles added in there. Or you can come up with your own great titles, which I'm sure you can come up with some really awesome ones. And I would love to see your suggestions, and we will vote in the comments, please. And then the one that gets the most votes, we will pick that one. And then if there's a tie in some way, then we'll do a drawing like we've done in the past, and we will read whatever book it happens to be that we pick at random. So do that. This is, of course, your group. It's not just mine; it's yours, and you need to tell me what it is that you would like to read on our next venture. So, thank you very much for joining me today. We'll see you in 2 days on Friday, and hope you have a good week. Take care, everyone.